Welcome to the Consciously Inspired Minds podcast, where we ditch the default and live life by design. I'm your host, Brandy White, personal growth enthusiast, entrepreneur, and lifestyle coach. I host conversations with creators, entrepreneurs, healers, and educators committed to living a life of truth, intention, and connection. Understanding how to evoke their higher nature, our guests take us on a journey of what it means to embody a life of conscious inspiration, joy, impact, and service. Get ready to be inspired. Welcome to Consciously Inspired Minds. I have such a fun episode in store for you today. I cannot wait to introduce you to my friend, Lauren Jewell. Lauren is a dedicated and experienced mind body practitioner specializing in digestive health and the gut-brain mood connection, with emphasis on trauma-informed practices. She's spent the past 7 years coaching female entrepreneurs on a journey towards improved energy, mood elevation, and overcoming insomnia through optimal gut health. Lauren employs the latest scientific research to craft personalized nutrition plans for her clients, blending this with metacognition, neuroscience, somatics, and emotional release techniques. Her passion for the intricate gut-brain connection drives her holistic approach to mental health, incorporating a multi-faceted method she's developed known as the quantum health experience. Hey, Lauren, how are you?
So good. And I'm so happy to be here with you right now. I know that you had mentioned this podcast many a times when we had been working together and we had finally started to get to know each other through our coaching and our mentorship and all of that stuff. So it's just a joy to be here. It truly is.
It's so exciting. It's like, it's finally here. Lauren and I have talked about this moment so many times. So, and Lauren and I know each other through a mentorship program that we were both involved in. And again, just one of those situations where you meet someone and you're just like, soul sister, hello, here we go. And so we're going to touch on a lot today that really lights me up, which is why I'm really excited for this episode. It's just going to be a lot of fun. But Lauren, I want to kick off first, which is with a little bit about your childhood. And I always like to know and get grounded in the childhood for our listeners. That way they can get a better idea of how that may have impacted where you are today. So tell us a little bit about that.
So knowing you and you knowing my story with my childhood, the things that I feel that are important to touch on would be that to start it off from the outside looking in, everything looked good. I mean, I lived in a very, very wealthy neighborhood. My father owned his own screen printing business. He started out as like a tie-dye guy in the 70s, and he built it up to do screen printing in the 80s and 90s. And then I was born, and we lived a wealthy life. And my mother was a stay-at-home mom. I had my brother, and then I had my stepsister, who was actually already out of the house by the time I was old enough to really recognize that, right? So she's 15 years older than me. So for my childhood, at the time, it's all I knew, right? So I didn't realize then what I know now, but I was growing up in a household where my mother was an alcoholic. She was very depressed. She was not introduced to any of this work. And during her generation, all of that, like the way that they saw therapy, the way that they saw self-development work, I mean, it just was looked down upon. It was like you had to have like an extreme mental illness. If not, you're weak. Emotions are for the weak. And around here, what we do is we keep ourselves together and we present ourselves, right? And I've learned deeper in my family generational stuff that is very far back, right? It was all about the way we looked, especially for the women, and that we had to keep ourselves together. We stayed with the men type scenario. So I grew up around that. And what I saw a lot of my mother, who was very unhappy, drinking, coping with her emotions that she wasn't feeling or dealing with. And then my father worked a lot. And so I had these two extremes, like one where it was like very emotional, out of control, drinking, showed her emotions in a chaotic way. Loved my mother, loved her back scratches. We were very close, but I'm just explaining this in this sense. And then I saw my father, who seemed very calm and collected. He was always like, everything has a place. We can talk about this. We don't need to scream about this. Let's get this sorted out. But he was always at work. He was never home. And that was the issue with my mother being unhappy, right? So I saw these two contradicting things, and it just so happens that I picked up those two things. So the way my childhood turned out was that I started to not deal with my emotions. I started to repress. And as time went on, my mom got sick. My brother started using drugs and alcohol, and I repressed all of it and I held it together. I was called the hippie child. I was called the mediator. And I would sit and mediate our family discussions when we'd be called down to the living room. And so that was really the beginning of it all. And I'll let you kind of intro in this part for a second. If you want to ask me any questions, we can kind of lead into what happens next.
Yeah. I think probably a lot of the listeners can relate to that as well, as being a fixer. And I think maybe a lot of our audience are fixers and just really wanting to support and help in any way they can. So, I mean, I can certainly relate to that growing up in the sort of childhood, which was similar in the way of being in a household of addiction and alcohol. So for me, it was, how can I make this better? How can we talk this through? How can I fix this? How can I make the relationship better? So I can certainly relate a lot to that. So as we kind of segue into your journey today, take us through now back to, I'd like to spend some time in your days of addiction and how that got you here. And also even how observing your mother's addiction could have put emphasis on some of those behavioral patterns for yourself. Tell me a little bit about that.
So to really ease this in, this will flow beautifully. So my childhood, you guys just heard about that. I became very hypervigilant, and I thought I was very empath. Like I was like, I'm an empath. I can feel people. Like I just really sensitive to energy. But really what I found in my teen years and growing up was that I just became hypervigilant. So I became very aware of other their emotions. I didn't like any type of chaos, any type of conflict. And so through my teen years, my mother and my father separated, and I began to hang out with my friends, right? I was like building my belief structure. I was becoming more independent. I had to grow up really quickly already. So I was like, I want no parts of this. And I started to really rebel. My mom ended up getting sick right after I graduated. Moved out of my family surroundings, right? I wasn't living with my father. I wasn't living with my mother. I had my first place. She got sick. She died within 2 weeks. And at this point, I was drinking heavily, but it was more like the family knew, and they were just like, oh, she's a teenager. Like, this is normal. This is totally normal. She's just drinking. But I wasn't just drinking. I was like blackout every single night. I would aim to go there so that way I couldn't remember the quickest, fastest route. And what it did for me was it allowed me to express myself. It allowed me to become outgoing because I was so hypervigilant that when I wasn't on a substance, I was so in my head and I was in so much judgment. And I did not know this then, but like I know it now. Right. I was in so much judgment and like constant processing, constant worrying about what I said, what I did, people thinking about me, that it numbed me. So when my mom died, I had absolutely no coping mechanisms other than to drink and to work. And what do you think I did? I dropped out of school and I started waitressing, and I started drinking even more. And then I started waitressing all the time. I was making good money. I was financially independent in my sense, right? And I ended up meeting a guy who was perfect trauma bond for me because his father had just committed suicide. We bonded on that our parents had just died. And he just so happened to dabble with painkillers. And I knew about painkillers. I knew about that. My brother had an addiction with it, and I would never get addicted. I said, I could play around with them though. And so then my addiction took hold because I fell in love. He had them around. didn't realize that I was just really sticking and going towards the things that took me out of my body. And I was not dealing with her death. I couldn't feel anything. I was numb, completely repressed, and the depression, the anxiety really, really started to take hold. And so I just started to numb more and more and more. And it went on for total with the drinking, it was 15 years, but with the opiates, it was about 10 years. And I essentially had fallen down some stairs while I was drinking and using those painkillers and was able to get prescribed them, which really created a rationalization of why I should be taking them. So it taught me a lot of lessons during those 10 years, and I'm happy to expand on that. But I essentially was just running from feeling the pain, but I was creating more pain by doing that.
So during that time, what was the family dynamics like? Did your dad come to you and say, hey, we're seeing these changes and we're concerned? Was there any sort of intervention that tried to happen?
There was no intervention. So at this time, my mother had passed. So when my mother passed, the family fell apart completely, completely fell apart. Everything was separate. My sister's family was separate. My brother was living with his girlfriend, and my father had his own life too. And so again, being the fixer, I would still have relations with everybody, but there became to be conflict, and there became like people were angry at each other. And the more conflict, the more anger that there was, I kind of separated myself from everybody. But eventually I kind of came back into my father's life, and there was absolutely no intervention. There was more of a coming together and experiencing the addiction together. Like, he was well aware of it, but because I was prescribed, in his belief system, he believed that it was rationalized, that it was okay, that I would never go to the extremes of it was an addiction. Obviously, I needed them. The doctor said so. And so it made me sicker, because I knew it was wrong, but I also was totally leaning towards that. And so it allowed it to happen way longer than it should have.
And so you were somewhat functioning at this time as you were a workaholic and really independent at that time in your life at such a young age.
I was very independent, very functioning. Most people did not know.
So did the addiction help you function in a way that allowed you to just, I guess, in the survival mode, of course, but how do you think you were able to even survive through the addiction and then also being independent and responsible for your well-being, for your survival?
It's a really good question. And I think that that's something that I look back on that all the time now when I'm coming to a forefront, and I'm like, oh, I can't possibly get through this. And I'm like, no, I can get through it. I literally sat on a hamster wheel for 10 years. Feeling like I was going somewhere literally in sticky, in mud. That's what it felt like. Because I knew that I was working, some weeks I would work 90-hour weeks. I am not even, or my paychecks would be 90-hour paychecks. And that money would be gone within 3 hours. I was spending it all on my addiction, and it was going into my body and cycling out. And I would just continuously accept this as my life, because I felt as if I did not numb this pain, that I would die ultimately. It's such a sick cycle. It truly is insanity. But I was capable of being able to keep fluid for a little bit. I had no relationships at this point, probably about 7 years in. All my old relationships were gone. They were becoming aware of it. I surrounded myself with people who I don't even remember who they are now. And they were in my life, daily in my life. Yeah. They were not good people. But essentially, it became one of those things where when I finally chose to get sober, it was because I was like, I'm either going to die or someone around me who I love is going to die because of this. You know what I mean? I just was like, something has to change. I did not come here to do this.
So take me to that moment. What was that moment for you? That epiphany, that moment of grace? How did that feel? Where were you? What were you experiencing at the time?
So this is a very clear image for me, and I remember it like yesterday. I actually write about it all the time. And it was we were going into 2019. So it was New Year's Eve going into 2019. And I was working at a restaurant that evening, and it closed at 10. But I remember getting off. It was raining out. And I had to wait for a Uber or Lyft, whatever it was, because I didn't have a car at the time, couldn't afford it. And I had to go outside. It was in a downtown little area where I live, very cute town on the water, very lively on New Year's Eve. So you can hear the kitchens clinking. You can hear the people kind of hoot and hollering. You can hear the champagne glasses being poured. And you could also, I remember very clearly, smell the smell of wet cigarettes and garbage, because I remember standing right by like an overhead that was near the garbage. And it was in this moment, don't know why it was this moment, right? Like there was no difference from today than any other day when it was raining. It was just in this moment. I remember I was waiting for that ride, and something hit me when I was looking around, realizing that I was not getting in that car to go home and celebrate the ball dropping. I was not going to a party like a normal, I probably was 27, 20, I'm not sure exactly the age, but young enough to celebrate and still be out with friends. I was on my way to get well, and I had to go get well. If not, I would have been in agony. I wouldn't have been able to work the next day, and then I wouldn't have been able to afford the upcoming days, right? It was just a hamster wheel I was on. And so I was sitting there waiting for that ride, and something spoke inside of me that basically said, if you do not choose to get sober, you will not know exactly what's going to happen, but it will not be good. But if you do choose to get sober and figure this out, your story going to be shared with millions one day. And I remember hearing it and just being like, okay, yeah. Obviously, whoever's speaking to me, right? It's my like intuition, it's my higher self. And like, I'm like, whoever's saying this just obviously doesn't understand. And it wasn't that moment that I chose that, but it was planted in my head. And I began to ask for help and speak out about it to people, asking, what can I do? How can I do this in the easiest way possible, right? Not understanding.
What's the quick fix at that time when we first start on those journeys? It's like, okay, how do I fix this? Like right now. When at the end of the day, now being in the work for as long as we have, Lauren, we both know that there is no fixing. We're not broken. We're not right. We're just healing. We're in that healing process, as we always are. It's easy to dismiss those moments. And we've talked about that many a times on some of these episodes, which is listening to that intuition and hearing that higher self, that voice come through, and you're like, what is this? But when you are in a place to really begin to trust that and understand that and become more aware of it, it's so powerful because it's exciting when it happens. Once you become more aware of it and can trust it, it's exciting because like, damn, this was just a really strong download I just got. Like this wasn't something that I would normally say to myself on a typical day. This is a moment of grace, really, as I say. So after that moment, you went home to get well. What were some of the first next steps into your recovery? Because this was the point in which you decided, is that right?
Correct. It was the point
to get sober.
That it was the point that I began to get vulnerable enough to start grieving the fact that I realized where I was and who I was, because I think I was in denial. I think I was putting myself on a pedestal, believing because I was functioning and because I was independent that I wasn't like everybody else. And because of that, I remember I began kind of like, I was spending a lot of time by myself at the time. And so I remember I would kind of like see my mother's picture and I would start crying. And I believe a lot of the messages and that was from her. Like I do believe they were little nudges, and I began to want to make her proud. My brother and my brother's girlfriend are all sober too. And at this point, they were probably sober 7 years. And I think they began to get worried too, because they could tell my addiction had progressed to another level where it was very, very, the odds of me overdosing were very high. And so I reached out to my community of people that I knew, because I knew a lot of people who had gotten sober. I mean, when you're in that world, people do get sober. And so I thought that going to meetings were going to be the fix. And essentially they were not. And then I finally had to put myself into treatment. And I tried to do it through the easiest way possible, like you said. Did not work. After 10, 15 years, it's like I went for one day and I think I made it like maybe max 36 hours. And I was crawling out of my skin. And I knew that wasn't it. I knew that like that didn't mean that I was never going to go back, but I essentially had tried. I had made my mark. I understood what the assignment was at that point. Like I really understood you have to prepare yourself for this. Like this is not going to be some easy like movie where you're like rolling through and it's this 5-star place. No, it's going to be a public hospitalized detox and it's going to be uncomfortable. And so
let me ask, you mind if I interject real fast and ask you, had you been having thoughts of recovery before that moment that happened to you outside the restaurant that evening? Had you had your curiosity around being sober, had that been in motion at that point?
So I honestly didn't want to be sober because I didn't know any other way. So to put it lightly, like I started drinking, like began my first drinking introductory to any type of substance outside of myself was at like 12. And the time in between all of that, things got rougher and rougher within the family. And so my idea of it was not like, I didn't know there could be another way of life.
Yeah, you didn't know any different. You didn't know that you could feel better. Like that was your homeostasis. Like that being in that feeling was what you thought was normal and how you were destined to feel. So interesting.
I didn't know I had agency. To go back in. I didn't know I had agency over my body. I didn't know that. What I know now is that you have the power to completely change the way you feel at any moment through your, On-Demand Pharmacy of Bre. You have the power at any moment to change the way you feel through nutrition and changing your diet to help with your mental health. I didn't know that movement was a medicine. I didn't know that intimacy and connection was a medicine. I didn't know that just being outside and appreciating the mundane was a medicine. And I think a lot of people don't know their medicines because they have not slowed down enough to actually listen to the intelligence they have in their body and to realize that they have been taught to look outside of themselves for that quick fix that we were talking about.
So going back to finding a place or something still outside of yourself, okay, where can I go where I can be supported and held and educated on what this recovery process will look like? I can't even imagine the journey that was trying to figure out what felt best for you at the time. Yeah. So you started talking a bit about this. I'd love to hear more around where you found yourself, where you found the most support, where you didn't find support. And I really want to sit here for a moment too, Lauren, because I know there has to be at least someone listening to this right now who could potentially be going through the same thing. And so how can we support them? Yeah. And normalize what might be happening for them.
Yes. Thank you for that. Thank you for bringing me down back to earth and realizing that too. And in this moment, there's someone listening, and there is, and it brings tears to my eyes because I remember just watching people on social media when I was not sober yet. After I had my attempt, I had left. And so I was ashamed. I was like, I'm never going to get well. This is it. And watching people on social media who I would find who had gotten sober and they were capable of sharing about it. And I saw so much strength and power in that and their vulnerability and like not being afraid of saying that this is something that so many people go through. So thank you again for bringing me back down to earth with that. But for me, it really was I didn't have the money and I didn't have the family financial support. So I had to go through, I think I ended up going through Medicaid. I think I had lost my job at that point after I left the facility. And so I lost my job after that. And I ended up getting on the state insurance. And basically they were able to bring me into a facility that would allow me to go in there. Now I was on a medication called methadone at the time to just keep me afloat while also still in my addiction. And when you are on that medication, a lot of facilities won't take you in. So I had to find one specific facility. It was not greatest, but they knew what they were doing to come off of that, because it has to be basically, they just need to monitor you because the odds of it being successful is very low. And so when I went in there, I was scared. I was so scared, but I also knew that if I could just make it through those 36 hours, that I didn't last the last place, then I would be okay. And then I would just wait for the next 24 hours, and then I would be okay. And the next 24. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And I had a temporary sponsor before I went into that facility. It was a woman who I had met at a meeting. And I asked her she just stayed in touch with me. She helped me figure out what I needed to do next. So if you go to any meetings in your area, you can go into them. They will welcome you with open arms and just ask if anybody's open to sponsoring you, helping you with your next steps, whether you need to go to a detox facility, an outpatient facility, and just attend meetings, right? Because at the time, I was not being respectful going to those meetings. I was not sober. So she knew that. So she basically interjected and helped me get into that detox facility. Now, when I went in there, like I said, I've called it my exorcism, to be honest with you. It was like an enlightening period for me, because I had to sit through the pain and the discomfort, which was very physical, mental, and spiritual. And it lasted for about few days. Most people, this is not going to be the case, but because I was on that certain medication, it was a lot longer due to a half-life. And once I got through that 36 hours, I remember praying for the first time in, a decade, and just being like, it's been a while. I'm very sorry that is under these circumstances, shaking and sweating. But I was just like, if you could just help me get through
just complete surrender.
Yeah. Because if not, I wouldn't have gone back. I mean, I was like, this was so uncomfortable for me to allow my body to purge those toxins out of my body, and to come to the realization of who I had become, what I had done, what I'd been doing to my body, with no respect to the intelligence that we have, to the life that I've been given, to my mother passing at such a young age. And it was enlightening. It's literally the epitome of my story. It's just, that's why I'm sharing this right now with you guys so openly, because so many people experience something like this. It doesn't have to be the exact story, but there's somewhere in your life that you have shame, and you just keep putting it aside, just thinking that if you do everything else, it will work out. There's something in your life that you know exactly what it is. It popped up right as I said it, and you're pushing it aside. And I promise that when you surrender and you choose to get vulnerable with yourself, and you ask for that help, and you release whatever needs to be released, and you go through that process, it will open up the gateway for that feeling that you have, that place that you feel you are walking towards. And essentially that's what happened to me. But when I got out, it wasn't the answer like I thought it was going to be. It wasn't, oh, I got sober, everything's good now, and let's skip on over there to sober life and everything's going to be fine. It was not like that.
So 2 things I want to mention to what you just said. And one of those is you had written this article, and we'll have a link to it in the show notes so folks can learn more about you after the interview today. But you say in this article, your system knows how to heal in the same way as it knew how to self-protect. The bigger the impact you want to make, the cleaner and clearer you will need to be. And when I read that, it resonated so deeply. And as you know, I released alcohol almost a year ago. And not because there was an addiction but I just had this inner knowing that if I wanted to continue to make the impact I'm here to make in the world, something else had to release, and it was the alcohol. Because for me, it was taking up too much time. It was taking up too much attention. It was taking too much money. It was it was just taking up space in a way I didn't want it to take up space. I wanted to make room for something else. Yep. And so, and that's the first thing I wanted to say, because I thought that was so beautifully said. And then my question to you is, if you could maybe, and I know I'm really deducing this down, I'm trying to be respectful about it as I do it, But if you could name, let's say, 5 different phases of the recovery process for you, just going back, what would that be? What would you tell someone who is going through this process that, wow, if nothing else, you will most likely experience these 5 things through the different phases of recovery? What would that be? Yeah.
So,
I have you in the hot seat right now, so we're going to give you some grace here.
You're fine. You're good. This is a dream of mine to be able to speak openly about this and give somebody else permission to do the same. So it's all good. I would say that, like we spoke about, it's just the awareness and coming to terms with the denial of reality that you've been in. That's really what it is. They say it's insanity, but in truth, insanity is also just you're denying your reality. You're denying the truth that's in front of you and you're resisting it. So there's a fear. So it would be just to accept and become aware. You don't even need to accept it. Become aware. And you realize that there's a problem. And surrender, right? So choose to become vulnerable. Like surrender to the fact that you need help. And obviously going through the process of the detox, that would be part of the vulnerability, the surrender, asking for help, allowing your body to purge itself, allowing yourself to have space and time to come to terms with whatever it is that you need within your recovery. And then you're going to reach a spot where you're going to hit, they call it a pink cloud. And I definitely reached this spot where you're going to be.
Pink cloud?
Yeah. So it's where you are like the teenager, like this is like teenager era where you're like, I know everything. I already know the answers. Like, I'm good.
Interesting.
I got this. Sobriety is going to be a breeze. I feel amazing. Oh my God. Like, I don't have anything in my system. This is amazing. I'm going to go out there, and then boom, life happens. And you're like, oh, okay, I have no coping mechanisms, right? And so that's what I learned was a lot of people will go to meetings, and I do fully suggest that. I went to like 2 meetings a day for the first month or 2. It doesn't matter. There's no time limit. So please don't listen to any of my time frames. But what I found was you have to like catch it before that happens. So just realizing, staying in surrender, realizing that you are powerless over this, that you can't sit there and try to like put a time frame on it, because when you do that, you're basically preparing for a relapse. When you're like, I'm just going to stay sober for a certain amount of time, and then you're basically just like putting a date on, hey, I'm going to start drinking again at this time, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
So it's just realizing, surrendering to it, and realizing that it can hit you at any point because it was a coping mechanism. So another phase that I would say is experiencing when life does hit you. You're going to hit an awakening where you're going to say to yourself, like, oh, now I realize this is like harder. Now I realize why I began drinking in the first place. And it's in that moment, I feel like what I experienced again, that you'll be coming at a fork, right? Like you're going to either say, well, I can't handle this. This is too much. My body is going back into its old programming. So I'm going to go back to what I know, which is comfortable, even though it may not be good for me. Or you choose to say, hey, I already know where this road goes. I need to learn the art of change. And this is where I came in. This is where I found there was a gap, a really big gap in the recovery community. Because yes, we can talk about it. We can talk about our traumas. We can talk about our experience with alcohol. We can listen to other people talk, but there was no visceral body release of any type of emotion. There was no coping mechanisms that I was taught other than calling people, going to meetings, obviously being vulnerable with your emotions. Yes, but you have to learn how to regulate yourself and teach your body how to expand itself into the new identity that you're building. This is a brand new identity. And so our mind.
And that's hard to do even for someone who isn't dealing with addictive behavior. So I remember going back 4 years ago when I was creating this new identity for myself. And it's like, gosh, how lonely, how scary, how unsure, all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you got nutrient deficiencies on top of it, right? So this is where the gut-brain connection part comes in. So you have nutrient deficiencies. Whatever if you've been drinking, there's like boatload of nutrient deficiencies that come with drinking. With drugs, same thing. Certain types of drugs all deplete you of certain nutrients. And a lot of them are all tied to anxiety and depression. They're literally research. It's proven that those deficiencies cause depression and anxiety. So you'll get hit with this. They tell you that you're neurotransmitters are healing, that your body's not capable of producing these chemicals. And usually you will go to the doctor because you're going to be hit with anxiety and depression.
Okay.
Right. And so again, we go to the doctor because that's what we're told. And like, for myself, I was told that my addiction was rooted in a deficiency in Lexapro and in Adderall. They said that my ADD, untreated adult onset ADD, was the reason why I experienced addiction. I was like, that doesn't make sense. But like, I didn't know at the time. So it was really learning how to take care of my body. So I think that the last phase is just learning how to really take responsibility for your own body and replenish it. And how you feel comes down to how you feed yourself, learning how to feed yourself properly, nourish yourself uniquely, personalized, and how to really reparent yourself to soothe yourself without alcohol or any other substance.
So this gap that you talk about in the recovery process and the ability to be resourced with coping mechanisms and nutritional training, really, that's a miss there. They don't introduce that in the recovery process at all. Wow. Okay.
They definitely not with nutrition. So like it will be baseline. So think about when you go to your doctors and they're like, you need to lose weight, go work out and eat better.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
So let me ask you this. So then when you went to the doctor, when you were feeling this depression or in this dysregulation, did they ask you questions about your lifestyle? No, they did not.
They asked you questions, but you can tell it's a questionnaire that has to be asked.
Yeah.
And there's no correlation made with it. And it always ends up to be a prescription.
Yeah. Did you tell them about your addiction and your history with addiction?
Oh, they knew. This was literally a addiction place. Like this was a recovery doctor's office.
The doctors, though, when you went, okay. So the doctor's office was within this recovery.
It's just a literally like they have places where you can go for treatment after you get sober.
Wow. I didn't realize. I thought you went to a separate physician who didn't know anything about your addiction history or anything. Okay. Because for me, it's like, all right, well, how do we sort of normalize this conversation around our addiction history with our physicians and making sure that we're all holding hands in the process of how we take the next best steps in health and recovery. But
they usually outsource now. They have doctors and facilities for that place now. So your primary doctor will obviously have that paperwork sent to them from the rehabilitation center. And then usually you will be outsourced to, I don't know if that's in the right name, but there's outpatient. And then there's recovery, like doctor's office, which is based around treating the person who is in recovery, which is other prescriptions.
So you write, I want to make sure that I read this to the listeners as well. In this article, you say, I was told that my depression was due to a deficiency in Lexapro. I'd soon find out that my depression was rooted in a dysregulated nervous system, nutrient deficiencies, low self-worth, and a past filled with unresolved emotions. I get chills, Lauren, as I read that. How did you begin the journey of discovering that there was a gap here for you and that this may be a key to your recovery?
COVID happened and I had to sit with myself. And this was 6 months after I'd gotten sober. And so I had to sit with myself and I hit that fork in the road. And I was really bored. At the time I was waitressing. And so I wasn't working at all. So because they had shut down all the restaurants and I was on the medication. I accepted that medication when they gave it to me, but I was very hesitant to doing it because I'd never been I didn't want to go back on medication when I had just come off everything. So I was very skeptical of everything in the first place. I believe in it. I do believe people will need it. It was just the terms that I was in, right? It was just where my story just related to anybody else's. But in my story, I saw the wording a little odd. And I also saw where it had me give my power away again. And when COVID happened, I realized that my depression and anxiety was getting worse on it, right? I walked out of there with 4 new prescriptions And so being on 4 new medications, I was like, this should be getting better. I'm obviously getting worse. I need to start taking hold of this. So I started to research how to come off these medications properly. What can I do to start my body coping naturally, holistically? And I had time on my hands. And so I started learning about that. And essentially, I talked to my doctor, because you don't want to just come off of those medications.
Sure.
Talked to my doctor, weaned down, had a withdrawal from those too. And I was fine with that because I experienced the previous one. And essentially that really began my journey, where I was like, I need to just figure out how to take care of my body. Like, I need to say sorry, show it some love, and I want to be able to feel good because I got shit to do.
Yeah.
I got stuff I need to do. And I started to really realize that like, I didn't get sober to feel this way. I wasn't born to only go through addiction. I'm here for something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just want to tell all the listeners, Lauren is the best researcher I have ever met. I mean, if there is something you need to know or want to know, Lauren will have it at the ready for you. And so this is when Lauren and I first met. I thought I was the only one. I mean, she's quite the researcher. I'm not as heavily researched as she is, but I will say, I thought I was the only person sort of going through this podcast obsession and this book obsession. And she and I meet, and I'm just like, we're exchanging podcasts and books and all these resources. I'm like, this is amazing. So Lauren, and I say all that because Lauren definitely pulls, as I mentioned in the intro, a lot of scientific based research and information into the work that she does, which is so critical. Lauren, I want to segue now into your coaching practice and pulling all of that experience now into the purpose and passion behind Lauren Jewel Coaching. And tell us, the client, your ideal client that you're serving today, what is she going through? What are some of the symptoms she's experiencing?
So my client, if they were listening right now, or soon to be client, usually they are a very driven woman, and they are either entrepreneur or they are just somebody who's a go-getter. And the symptoms that they're experiencing are going to be very similar to they're just burnt at both ends, but they also have a little bit of kick still in them, right? But they're starting to notice that their body is kind of slowing them down, whether it's digestive issues, they're starting to have stomach aches, maybe they're getting headaches. They're feeling a little anxious. They can't really slow down, but they have so much stuff they need to do, but they also want to relax and they don't know how to. And they're also probably experiencing maybe some low libido, like it's just not really there anymore. And they just think that's part of getting older. And they may have glimpses of really happy days and feel good days, but typically your day is fueled by caffeine and probably skipping a few meals, not on purpose, but because you're just so dang busy.
Sure.
And my client essentially usually turns out to be a mirror of what I've experienced and transformed. Everybody that I've attracted has become somebody that I can reflect back to them, an experience that I had, because one of my values with my work is the deeper that I heal, the higher that I will go and the more impact I can make. And so I made it my mission after that fork in the road when COVID hit was I'm going to see how far I can transform and how far I can really take this and help myself, which ultimately ended up turning into me being like, oh my God, this whole thing has led me to my purpose.
Right.
I'm here to help people and teach them all that, but this is crazy.
And that's usually how it happens, right? When you start to follow your inspiration. And I say that a lot too. It's like, if we could just replace purpose with inspiration, it would really take a lot of the pressure off of ourselves to just find that one purpose. Because I don't really subscribe to that. For me, it's like, how do we just follow what inspires us that will then lead us to the next best thing? And how we can just present for the highest good.
Right.
And so you did that. And I love that. And you're super committed to yourself and you're super committed to your clients and your community. And going back to that time during COVID, when because you are so independent and you have a way of taking responsibility for yourself and getting equipped and resourced and what inspires you. Mm-hmm. I love that about you so, so much. But you came to a realization that you're like, wow, okay, I want to further my education and get further training in this particular topic. Take us a little bit through what that looked like for you and the few additional experiences that you had to get you where you are today. Yeah.
So it happened in stages. And this is how I did not at the time have any idea what I was about to, I was going to go back. I had no idea it was going to happen so fast too, or happen with such capacity, right? So it happened in stages. At first, I just wanted to help myself. I wanted to nutritionally begin to heal my body because I did understand that concept because I had been coaching previously. Before I got sober, I was coaching people. I did understand nutrition. It was just swept under the rug. No one knew about my addiction. I was very independent. But I first worked on my nutrition and I saw my own transformation. So I lost 40 pounds, put on a ton of muscle. I felt a lot better. I came off that medication and I realized I felt a little independent at that point. I was like, okay, I feel so much better and I've done it myself. I feel like I'm taking my agency back. And then I realized that the anxiety and the depression was more so fueled mentally. It was I could tell I had my own blocks, as in, I don't believe in blocks. I think we create our own blocks like we've been taught, but I had these things that I was not allowing myself to go towards. It was this clear wall that I would walk up to it and it would just bounce me back, right? And so I realized, hey, I should probably start working on my mindset. I should start working on learning how to take agency over my mind. Right. So then I dove into the podcast, the books, and then I found a mentor. And that's where me and you actually ended up meeting, was through our mentor and understanding the connection between the mind and the body. Mm-hmm. And when I put those two together, and I realized the power that our emotions, I had to grab from all these different places to finally feel whole, because you'll find a lot of people will do the mindset work. They will do the body work, as in the nervous system, the expansion, but they still don't fully feel totally in their power yet. And it's because of, if they have inflammation within their body, if they have an addiction with food, which is super under the rug a lot of times. And I realized in that moment, I was like, I want to bring this to the world. I want to somehow put these two together. So at the same exact time, I decided to go to school it was a year-long program through the Institute of Transformational Nutrition, physical, mental, spiritual nutrition. I loved that when I heard it. I was like, what is this? Dealing with trauma with nutrition, realizing that it's so much more than what's on your plate. Mm-hmm. What are you really hungry for? Food, what are you really hungry for?
So much more.
Having a deeper meaning.
Yeah.
I used to believe that I wasn't smart. Turns out, like you said, oh my God, imagine if I believed that belief and I thought that I was not smart and I wasn't capable of doing what I needed to do.
Yeah.
So many of us do that.
Yeah.
And we let us hold us back. And in truth, I'm very smart, very good researcher. I just need to be interested in it.
2 points I want to make here is the importance of investing in yourself. And I did not realize this 4 years ago when I began on my journey. It was if I could not see a return on my investment immediately, or if I could not be certain that I would get this for my investment, then I'm like, no, it's not for me. But investing in yourself in a way that feels authentically aligned to you, whether that be going back to school, whether that be going through a mentorship program, whether that be going on a long weekend retreat, whatever that means for you, investing in yourself and allowing yourself opportunity to get still and to begin the healing process, because it's one of those things where we are always in process. I think that we are in process for our purpose, our inspiration here in this physical realm, even when we don't even realize we're in process, until we can build that awareness and then look back and start to connect the dots, is when we're like, oh shit, that's why I went through that experience. That's why I was meant to be in that relationship, fill in the blank. And so a lot of what inspires me, and a message that I would just shout from the rooftops for all women to hear, is this message on listening to our higher self. And the whole purpose around this podcast of living a consciously inspired life. And it's something that is inside each and every one of us to really step into. There's something inside of you. If you're listening to this podcast, I know for certain you have had a thought of inspiration, joy, purpose, sharing your light, being seen, being heard. I know you have. And so how do we begin to step into that? How do we begin to share our light and serve in a way that we are here to serve, that feels authentically aligned to us? And unless we give ourselves opportunity to heal the trauma, to heal the addiction, to heal the toxic relationships, we will continue to a position of feeling stuck, unfulfilled. What is my purpose? So this is my invitation to you to begin to follow what inspires you and to listen to those nudges and to listen to that intuition and those callings, because they are there for a reason. They are there to get you reconnected to self. So, Lauren, what would you have to add to that? Because I know you have something to add to that.
Oh, I have so much to add to that. That was beautiful, by the way. And two, I would say that there's two different types of nudges that I've learned through my journey. And there's one, it could be, hey, a symptom in your body. It's literally like, hey, there's something going on. I need you to address this. But then there's an anxiety type of intuition, a nudge that's not an anxiety, but it's there and you are denying it, kind of. You don't want to listen to it, but you know deep down that something needs to change or you need to do something differently. And so it will become an anxiety and it will become an alarm. And then eventually, if you don't listen to what your intuition, what your body's saying to you, and you continue to deny it, our body reads it as a threat. And this is fact. Our body reads it as a threat and it turns it on our fight or flight. And so this is why we find a lot of people in survival, because so many of us actually listen outside of ourselves, right? Like we go for what our friend thinks. We go for what we should do, what society says. That wouldn't be acceptable. I can't just quit what I went to school for and quit my job and go after my dreams. What? I'm going to be happy? I mean, I can't do that. Like it's realizing that we have disconnected ourselves from our body and our mind. And we have been living in this fear in our thought process, right? In our mind, it just continuously goes. And it's going to rationalize. So when you slow down enough, and that's what I did, I began to slow down, and it was really hard to just finally slow down, be in my body. And so first I had to feel those emotions. I had to allow myself to process through. And what I've realized is that people don't actually how to feel emotion. We know how to overanalyze emotion. Let me tell you.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. That's so true. I can tell you, and I know you've experienced the same, Lauren, when I started on my journey, I had so much emotional congestion. Yep. I mean, I was crying. I was releasing all of my emotions from my past pain and suffering, from my grandmother passing away to my shift in identity through releasing a 14-year career and what that meant. Pain around how I was showing up as a mom, how I was showing up in relationships in my life, my family dynamics. I mean, it was every day. It felt like there was some sort of emotion coming up, but I was allowing myself that time to feel and just to be still and to sit still. And my first job, I was 12, 13 years old. And so ever since then, I'd constantly always been in this state of mind of doing and just moving and achieving and all that. And when I finally just slowed down, I was like, wait, what? Is this for real? Like, I can just sit here and really just be with myself and listen to this podcast or read this book. And it took, it was an interesting place to be, and I still wonder, I don't wonder. There's a lot of gratitude for that time that I was given. And I was given that time for a reason, for a special reason. And rest is also a spiritual practice, everybody. It is
it's a business activity too.
Yes. So Lauren, take us through, you talk about 3 pillars of nutrition. One of those pillars being the physical, the mental, and then the spiritual. Tell us a little bit about how you weave those 3 pillars into the work that you do.
Right. Yeah. Well, again, like I had mentioned before, it's when we think about nutrition, a lot of us are like, nope, unless you're like ready to go, right? Because it's like, there's so much meaning behind it. There's so much like what people say, the right, wrong way, white, and black. But what I found is that food is a entryway into your self-discovery process, right? We're always going to be eating. And so there's a lot of behavior and habits connected to it. So what I have within the quantum health experience is 3 pillars. We have physical nutrition, which is all about how to properly nourish your unique self, right? I work with the gut-brain axis. So our microbiome is as unique as our fingerprint, which means that what works for us and what our body needs nourishment-wise is going to be completely unique, right? Same with our nervous system. We have our own unique map of our nervous system. So what you need as a client is going to be completely unique to your health history and how you've mapped out your nervous system. And so the expansion process of the physical nutrition includes personalized nutrition, nervous system love, right? So body work, learning how to reparent yourself, working with your breath, being in your body. And then also it's about really nourishing who you are through rest and play, right? And doing these things.
Right.
That's a key foundational piece in anywhere in life. You want to be able to feel at home in your body, right? To really recognize who your body is, be thankful for it. We're not like trying to get it to submit. We're not trying to force it into submission. You can't heal a body in pace. Point, period.
I love that.
I just did a speech on it.
I love that.
In Orlando. I will send it to you. It's absolutely key to realize that you will forever, if you are trying to heal a body you hate, you will continuously go into a cycle. You will stay in a cycle of yo-yo, all or nothing. You will not feel at home in your body. So the next pillar is all encompassing. So I work with mainly female entrepreneurs. And they're like, oh, people wouldn't invest in that when they're entrepreneurs. They want to invest in their business. And I'm like, but the foundational piece of your business usually is you, correct? So one of the most biggest self-sabotages I've ever seen in business is your body. So what we'll do is we'll work ourselves into submission till we get sick because we're so stressed out and burnt. Think about it, how much burnout there is right now. We will burn ourselves out and then we will end up feeling like not have any like luster for our business. We won't want to do anything. We'll be too tired. We will ultimately not have the brain capacity to like optimally create and be creative and all of these things. So the mental nutrition is all of.
Can I interject? This is just like such beautiful, beautiful timing right now. I wrote something down that I wanted to make sure I shared with the listeners that you had written in your article. Again, we'll provide a link to that in the show notes. But you say on entrepreneurship, becoming an entrepreneur is you starting a business attached to a self-discovery process. Every shadow, wound, and insecurity will show its face. This is when you show resilience or when you tap out. And I'm like, I get chills when I think about that, because even as I'm in my own entrepreneurial journey, this could not be more true. You don't ever think about it that way because it's kind of like this separation of church and state. You're like, okay, I'm over here. My business is over here. But that's really not the case. And I just interviewed a wonderful woman just the other day, and she said, I am my business and my business is me. Like we are one and the same. And like there's so much truth to that. Do you have anything to add to that?
That your worth is not attached to your business. Make the mistake of attaching your worth to your business, then it's you're all done. like you will ultimately sabotage yourself down, and you will basically just create mental narratives that like, oh my God, business is going down. That means that I'm not worth it. People don't like me. So what I would say is that yes, that like the ability for your business to expand depending on what type of business you have, obviously, you like your capacity to hold certain amounts of money, your capacity to hold responsibility, your capacity to hold success, all does depend on you and your ability to stay committed, but also be like attached, like not attached to anything. So understanding that like you are being of service, you are providing, you're a vessel of whatever creation you are bringing out into the world, and that it's in service of the whole. But it is not by any means like you are already worthy no matter what. You were worthy before you had the business. You were worthy when you were born. Like you did not come out of the womb and they're like, smack a 2.5 on her. She's got 2.5 less than that last one. Like, no, that does not happen. We're all born limitless. It's just really deconstructing. And this weaves perfectly into the mental nutrition part. It weaves perfectly into it because we have to break down with mental nutrition. What thoughts are you feeding yourself? What are you like? Is stress and pressure your favorite junk food? Because even though stress is calorie free, we abuse it. We use stress. We become addicted to it and we don't even realize it.
This emotional addictions.
We become addicted to it. We become, so many of my clients are experiencing some form of insomnia, whether they can't fall asleep or where they wake up at 2 or 3 because they have blood sugar dysregulation. And it all ties back to the gut. That's like the grand central station of it all, whether it's mental or whether it's physical. So your intuition, all the intelligence lives down there. All your immune system lives down there. Your serotonin, melatonin, dopamine, all that stuff is built in the gut, and it all communicates up through the nervous system to the brain. And so for you to be an optimal entrepreneur and to work at peak performance, and for you to expand, especially if you're doing all this nervous system work, you have to have a optimal body. You have to have the nutrients. You want to bring down any inflammation we have. We have so much toxins in the world, whether it's like the food, the people, the supplies that we use, all of these things, the stress, the mental stress. We can literally create stress just by thought alone, right? And so the third pillar is spiritual nutrition, which truly is about connection with self. So it's about resting, play, connecting with community, with the environment, and realizing that like, you are not the only thing in the universe, 1, and 2, that there is a bigger picture to this all. And when you can tap into energy and you can clear your energy field as in emotional, you can tap into release, like learning how to actually release emotion properly. And I call it like when I learned how to finally release and let go, because I didn't realize that I was holding on to my pain. It was part of my identity. I didn't know who to be without it. I didn't know who I would be. Someone asked me one time, they said, Lauren, who would you be and what would you do if you didn't have the amount of anger and pain and hurt and resentment? Who would you be? And I was like, well, what kind of question is that? It's like a trick question. And they're like, what would you do? Who would you be? And I'm like, I don't, like, what do you, like, I freaked out until I realized like, oh, I'm holding on to that because I wasn't willing yet to really take radical personal responsibility and realize that I needed the self-forgiveness. I needed to take the responsibility and realize that I'm always a common denominator in everything in my life. And so I get to choose and I can stand still and I can blame and I can not forgive and hold anger and poison myself. But the truth is that almost every single disease is rooted in emotional repression. It's rooted in emotions that we've stuck down, whether it's generational trauma hasn't been transmuted, but it's like when we do not know how to take care of our energetic body and take care of ourselves and truly take the responsibility of releasing these things that do not serve us anymore. I know it sounds metaphorically, but it is like emotions create a chemical reaction within our body from a thought. It's a cascade effect. So when we don't know how to release them, when we push them down, we've been taught they're bad, we've been taught that they're weak, or you're just like, I'm going to do it in private when I get home later. No, you're not. Don't even lie. You may break down every once in a while in the shower. You may break down in the car. Like, let's get real. You do not plan to go cry by yourself. It just happens because your body makes you.
Okay. How do people do this? So give us some tips on how we properly release emotion. I love this so much.
So it's somatic. It's called somatic, which means in Greek to be in the body. And emotion is energy in motion. I just want to give the listeners like an explanation if they're new to this. There's energy in motion, right?
Beautiful.
So in truth, emotions only last for 90 seconds. It is our attachment to that. It's when we focus on that emotion, and we usually judge it, right? Immediately, you usually feel an emotion. Oh, shouldn't be feeling right. Oh my God, what am I, a teenager? What am I, a kid? Oh, this is embarrassing. I can't cry inside of this person, right? Like think about the narratives, thoughts that go around when you feel emotion. And we only want to feel good emotion. So a lot of times the reason why, for example, you can't stop crying sometimes is that sometimes it's not because you're super emotional and it hurts you really bad. It's because of the narrative that you're perpetrating it with. Like you're continuously judging yourself for crying, and then you're crying because you feel really sad. Then you're in this loop. So my point with this is that emotions can move through you fairly quickly, but there's no timeline. There's no 10-step process to feeling your emotion, right? There's no, here's my guide. Right. There's no lose 10 tears in 1 week. There's nothing like that. But there is somatic processing where you want to be in your body and you want to self-soothe. So you want to create the safety for your subconscious mind. Because if you've been taught to repress your emotions for years, it's not going to allow you to do this. Like you're going to most likely judging me right now. You're like, this is the weirdest thing ever. This is crazy. But you can't see me on here, but it's called a butterfly hug. And you cross your arms, kind of like you're giving yourself a hug. And you go like this, and you tap on each side, and you just do it slowly, creating safety. And what you'll realize is that this feels like someone's hugging you, and it could be your mother, but you can also think of it as your higher self. You can think of it as yourself, and you just want to hold compassion for that little girl or little boy who has a judgment around emotion. Why is it unsafe to not feel emotion? And give yourself space to realize that you are safe. It does feel uncomfortable in your body, but it's literally just an electrical pulse. It's a chemical reaction within your body. It's not going to kill you. And the more that you can soothe this, usually, and this is what I had to do for myself, I had to give myself permission to cry. So I had to tell myself, I had to say it out loud. I would be like, yeah, I said it, like not really say it. So I had to say it in private by myself and say, it is safe to feel my emotions. Thank you, body. I love you, body. It's safe now, body. I'm here now, body. We're going to be okay here, body. I love you. It's safe to cry now, body. And you're soothing yourself. You're soothing your body. You're giving it permission. You're realizing that all along, your body wanted you to come step back in. And it's kind of like when there's no structure at a business, or like, let's say you're at a job and there's no structure and somebody just really wants somebody just to take charge. And so it becomes chaotic, and it becomes like you feel like you can't get anything done. And there's a lot of drama happening. So when you finally step back into your body and you start to slow down, use your breath, you allow yourself to feel, you'll start to realize that you do have a little bit of agency, and you can start to reconnect and breathe and feel all those things. But it's a real time thing. So you have to really do everything together. So you have to create safety throughout the body with physical nutrition. So bring down any inflammation. Because if there's inflammation, your nervous system will read that as we have to go back into safety mode, which controls the narrative within your thought process. And then with the mental nutrition, what we just talked about, part of that was included in the somatic processing, where you're creating the subconscious mind with safety, speaking to it. And then the spiritual aspect of it and the emotional, energetic aspect of it is really movement through your body. You can do screaming into your arm. It's like a tribal scream. I don't want you to scream out into the abyss. Again, you can't see this, so I'm not going to do it on camera because I would need to properly show you so you don't hurt your vocal cords. You can literally go to a rage room. So the biggest lesson I've ever had in my entire life was that forgiveness. I was really good at forgiving. Really. I was so good. I could go up to the high clouds. I could go up to the realms and be like, all right, I forgive them. I get it. Like, release, whatever, like I've let it go. But obviously I hadn't, because it would still be in the back of my mind. So one of my mentors taught me that you cannot get to forgiveness until you actually feel anger and you actually like allow that anger to process through that, like disappointment, whatever it is, that frustration. So going to a rage room near you, like it's a commercial. Yeah, near you. You will literally bring, you're literally going there you can donate to the rage room too, which is really cool, but you just break things and you feel like it's like the end of the world apocalypse when you go in there, but you're in like a jumpsuit and you have a bat, you have all this stuff and you can just scream and like break things. And you realize those endorphins that get released when you're working out and when you were doing the rage room and things like that, you'll realize that like you can feel your body vibrating. And when you feel vibration like that, that's energy leaving your body. So it moves energy through you and you're simultaneously detoxing your body and also allowing emotion to feel safe enough to move through. So it just takes a little bit more intention.
Wow. Yeah. Those are awesome tips. And I love those 3 pillars. I wanted to make sure that we got to those today. What are some of the outcomes of clients working with you, Lauren? What are some of these?
So thank you for asking this. With my clients, it's one of the most beautiful processes ever because this was such a dream of mine that I also tried to fight it when I first decided to really like bring it all together. I used to try to just do the nutrition or then the mindset. And then when I realized the power that I held myself working with clients, I have been validated and confirmed over and over again. And some of my clients, there are certain scenarios where they have a physical result. Whether they had migraines for 30 years and all of a sudden 2 months later, they're able to stop having migraines. Even I didn't grasp the bigness of that. I had to be like sat down and be like, Lauren, receive it. Like, let it in, Lauren. Like you need to realize like this person's a doctor who you're working with and you were the one who was able to do this. Right. So little things like that. And Incredible. It's because of not only do we work with her body with the inflammation in her gut health, but it was a lot of inner child healing that we did. So she was holding on to something and her body was trying to tell her, like, pay attention to me. Hey, like there's something that you're pushing through and you're trying to like continuously do. And you're not focusing in on this one area that you need to release. Right. And then with other clients, like it's just taking their power back. I have one who is starting a business now. Took a couple of months after we started working together, but she found her, which is like her higher self. She really realized that she had so much more agency for herself, has so much love for me, and I have so much love for her. She was one of my first clients. And just all that I have talking to her now, she's like, yeah, like I'm going to start a business. I can't believe like you're still with me every single day, even though we don't talk. And it's these little moments that I'm sitting here being like, wow, like who would have thought that this could be possible? Like, I know it works for me, but to see it work over and over again with my clients, like how conscious our world will become when we stop being so afraid to bring what we have into the world. Because I could have totally said I didn't even know, Warren. Do you know how much stuff I would know? Like, I don't need to know anything else. I know a lot. And I...
That's right. It comes down to the action piece. You can't, we can have these nudges, these calls, this intuition, but until we actually take action on them, like what does it all mean really? And Lauren, I just love like your purpose around your business is to take the complicated and avoided parts of health and simplify them into a simple system. And it's just in this world of so many choices and so many things to do, and we're just constantly overstimulated. I know I personally reach for the things that can help me simplify any type of process. And I think that your 3 pillars here, it gives me such a comprehensive ease around your process. And really, it feels very nurturing in the way of hitting these 3 pillars, the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. So, well, thank you for sharing that. All right, Lauren, a few closing questions for you. So the first question I have is going back to the addiction piece. what would you tell someone who is battling with addiction, but doesn't feel that they have the strength to get sober and to thrive? What would you say to that person?
I would say, for one, take a moment that you are here to be here and continue on. And I want you to know that I too was there. And I'm saying this if I close my eyes so that I can tap back into it, because it brings me directly back to a time when I was sitting on my bed that had no frame. It was on the ground and the room was a mess, and I was sobbing because I too didn't believe that I had the strength to do it. And if I hadn't have reached out for help, then I probably wouldn't have. So we can't do everything ourselves. And when we experience trauma, most addiction is rooted also, like most people who experience addiction also have experienced trauma. And if you remember in the beginning of this conversation, I said I was hypervigilant and I was also overly independent. And that is actually a byproduct of trauma. And what happens is we can't receive help. And so we actually deflect it. So if you're willing to open yourself up and ask for help, and realize that you're not going to do this all by yourself. This isn't meant to be done by yourself. This is meant to be supported by the people who understand, who have done it themselves, and they will help you take your first couple of steps, just like you did when you were a child and you didn't know what you were doing. And they'll get you back on your feet. You'll learn how to walk again. And one day you might be sitting here on a podcast, just like you, in awe of yourself.
Yeah. What does it mean to you to live a consciously inspired life?
It means that the deeper I deal, the higher I will go, and to see all perspectives, really, to allow myself to walk into the pain, to take the things that people usually hedge away from and walk into that pain and alchemize it and transform it into something beautiful. Because I truly believe that the darkness is part of light. It's just something that you have to transfer through so that you can actually see the contrast of the light and the dark.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Where can people find you, Lauren? Where can they learn more about Lauren Jewell coaching and everything else that I know you have available to share with our listeners?
I do have a lot of resources over the years. My God, my social media is basically just a learning hub. So my tag is Lauren Michelle Jewell. So you can find me on social media, like on Facebook, on TikTok, on IG, which is Instagram. So you can look me up there. I'm sure that will be tagged down below. But in truth, meet me on social media. Well, you'll get the vibe of me there too. And really what I offer is the personalized coaching right now.
Beautiful. Amazing.
Yes.
Lauren, it's been such a pleasure. I'm so glad that we were able to realize this moment today. It's really, truly been the highlight of my day. And anytime I get to sit down and really just connect with you is amazing. It's just amazing. So I appreciate you. Thank you for being you. And thank you for making the impact that you're making in the world. And everybody go check out Lauren at Lauren Jewell Coaching and all over social media. And don't be afraid if you want to send her a personal message, anything that you need. I know Lauren will be there to support you. So beautiful. Amazing. Thanks, Lauren. All right, everybody. Till next time. Bye-bye. That's all for today. Thanks so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. If you'd like to learn more about Consciously Inspired Minds, you can visit us at consciouslyinspiredminds.com. Until we connect again, explore what inspires you.